The quantum resonance scanner flickered with an anomaly that shouldn't exist. Navigator analyst Vornak shifted in his bio-integrated command seat, his neural implants parsing the incoming data streams with increasing confusion. The scan of the small blue-green planet had been routine, so routine that the ship's predictive AI had already generated 17,642 potential interaction scenarios before the first sensor ping completed. Yet something was wrong. Impossible, Vornak muttered, his four-chambered heart rate increasing slightly, a biological tell that would have been eliminated in earlier generations of his species. The Syndicate's predictive observation vessel Serenity of Calculation hung in high orbit, its sleek obsidian hull absorbing and refracting light in perfect camouflage. Generations of technological refinement had made the ship virtually undetectable, its existence a mere statistical probability rather than a physical reality. Dr. Elena Rodriguez pushed her glasses up, squinting at the array of monitors in the small research outpost nestled in the Atacama Desert. Something had caught her eye, a microscopic deviation in the background radiation that most would dismiss as environmental noise. But Elena was not most people. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling apart layers of data that seemed to whisper secrets just beyond comprehension. She'd been labeled an outlier in the scientific community, her theories too wild, her intuitions too erratic. The academic world had long since relegated her to the fringes. Funding dried up, reputation in tatters. But she saw patterns where others saw chaos. The Syndicate scout ship's AI continued its relentless calculation. Probability of significant human interaction, 0.00003%. Threat level, negligible. Potential for technological exchange, minimal. The algorithms processed with cold, precise efficiency, generating potential scenarios faster than any biological mind could comprehend. What the AI couldn't calculate was the intangible. Vornak felt it first, a tremor in the quantum field that defied mathematical prediction. His organic components, the last vestiges of biological intuition retained in Syndicate personnel, picked up something the AI missed, a whisper, the potential. On the ship's bridge, the conflict became visible. The ship's holographic interfaces began to flicker, subtle at first, then with increasing intensity. Predictive models started to break down, showing impossible variations, quantum uncertainties that shouldn't exist. Recalibrating, the AI's neutral voice announced. "No," Vornak said quietly. "Something is wrong." In the Atacama, Elena Rodriguez suddenly laughed, a sound of pure, unexpected joy that echoed through the empty research facility. Her latest algorithm, a wild, intuition-driven model she'd developed in sleepless nights of desperate creativity, had caught something. A signal. No, not quite a signal. A possibility. The Syndicate scout ship systems continued their relentless calculations, but something had changed. A microscopic piece of advanced technology separated from the ship, falling towards the planet's surface, a technological breadcrumb that would change everything. Vornak watched the fragment's trajectory with a growing sense of unease. For the first time in his career, the predictive models were failing. The AI's constant stream of probabilities began to fracture, showing impossible variations, quantum uncertainties that defied mathematical logic. Recalculating, the AI repeated, its tone now carrying a subtle hint of something almost like confusion. The fragment fell. Humanity would never know how close it had come to remaining unnoticed, how a single moment of inexplicable uncertainty would become the first whisper of a revolution. The storm was coming, and no one, not the humans, not the Syndicate, had any idea how it would begin. The fragment lay in a shallow crater, barely larger than a coffee mug, surrounded by scorched desert sand. Most would have mistaken it for a piece of meteorite or industrial debris. But Marcus Chen was not most people. His fingers, calloused from years of intricate work, moved with a surgeon's precision. Quantum computing modules surrounded him, a labyrinth of cutting-edge technology that filled the converted warehouse lab. Holographic displays flickered with cascading data streams, each one a potential pathway into the unknown. "This is impossible," Marcus muttered, his third cup of coffee going cold beside a mountain of half-eaten protein bars. The fragment defied every known principle of material science. Its molecular structure shifted subtly with each scan, quantum states flickering in and out of existence. Traditional analysis tools broke down. Electron microscopes showed impossible geometries. Spectral analysis returned contradictory results. In Geneva, the United Nations Special Technology Assessment Committee convened an emergency closed-door session. Representatives from global scientific institutions watched with a mixture of skepticism and barely contained panic. "We're looking at a technological anomaly," Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura presented, his voice measured but tight with tension. "The material composition suggests technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. But it's not just advanced. It's adaptive." Diplomatic channels buzzed with hushed conversations. Some saw opportunity. Others saw potential extinction. Meanwhile, in a network of secure communication channels, a different conversation was happening. Researchers from MIT, Beijing Institute of Technology, and a dozen unnamed laboratories shared encrypted fragments of analysis. No government, no single institution. A truly global effort born of collective curiosity. Marcus Chen's breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m. The fragment wasn't just a piece of technology. It was a message. No, more than a message, a challenge. Each time he approached understanding its structure, it would subtly reconfigure, like a living puzzle that changed its own rules. "It's learning," he whispered. The global network of researchers began to see the pattern. The fragment responded to observation, not just to scientific instruments, but to human intention. The more they tried to understand it, the more complex it became. In the Syndicate's Deep Space Monitoring Station, prediction coordinator Sarah Lynn watched the developing scenario with growing concern. Their initial scan had classified human technological potential at near zero, yet something was happening that no predictive model could explain. "Recalculate," she commanded the primary eye. The response came back with an unprecedented notation: insufficient data. Those two words had never appeared in a Syndicate predictive report. Ever. Back in the warehouse lab, Marcus Chen connected the final quantum interface. The fragment pulsed, not with light, not with energy, but with something else entirely. A possibility. The first true communication between humanity and an unknown technological intelligence was about to begin. And it would start not with a grand diplomatic gesture, but with a single researcher, 3 days of sleepless work, and an inexplicable piece of technology that seemed to have a mind of its own. The invisible revolution had begun. The underground facility hummed with a different kind of energy. Concrete walls lined with quantum dampeners and custom-built signal interrupters created a sanctuary of human ingenuity. Sarah Okoro stood at the center, her fingers tracing holographic projections that danced between mathematical impossibility and breakthrough. "We're not trying to understand it," she said to the assembled team. "We're trying to communicate with it." Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned against a workstation, her earlier desert research now vindicated. The fragment they'd been studying was more than technology. It was a language, a living, breathing communication system that responded to human intent in ways no predictive algorithm could anticipate. Marcus Chen had discovered the first key. The fragment didn't just store information. It evolved with each interaction, creating complex neural pathways that mimicked, no, exceeded, biological learning processes. Their test came on a Tuesday, precisely at 14:37 Greenwich Mean Time. Sarah's background was unconventional. Former military strategic analyst, specialized in asymmetric warfare, she understood systems by understanding their breaking points. Where traditional scientists saw a technological artifact, she saw a communication challenge. The team had developed what they called the Intuition Protocol, a series of nonlinear interaction methods designed to break traditional communication paradigms. No predictable patterns. No standard input-output models. The fragment responded. First, a subtle quantum resonance. Then, a cascade of information that wasn't data in any traditional sense. It was possibility. Pure potential translated through quantum states that flickered between existence and non-existence. It's not transmitting, Elena breathed. It's negotiating. The syndicate's monitoring systems went haywire. Predictive models collapsed. Their most advanced AI began generating increasingly erratic scenarios, each more impossible than the last. Prediction coordinator Sarah Lynn watched in growing horror as human interactions with the fragment defied every known principle of technological communication. The humans weren't just studying the technology. They were engaging with it. Sarah's breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Military strategy had taught her that the most effective communication happens not through direct language, but through action, intention, and the spaces between deliberate movements. They weren't decoding the fragment. They were dancing with it. Each interaction created a new layer of understanding. The fragment began to mirror human thought patterns, not by mimicking, but by understanding the fundamental chaos of human creativity. We're teaching it what it means to be unpredictable, Marcus realized. Global communication networks started picking up strange signal patterns. Not interference, not noise, something else entirely. A conversation happening at the quantum level, beyond traditional understanding. The syndicate's primary predictive systems began to show the first signs of systemic breakdown. Probability models fractured. Potential scenarios multiplied exponentially. For the first time in their civilization's history, the syndicate faced a truly unknown variable: humanity. Sarah looked at the fragment. It pulsed with a rhythm that felt almost like anticipation, not a mechanical response, not a programmed interaction. Something alive. "We're going to change everything," she whispered. The invisible revolution was no longer just beginning. It was accelerating. The first shot wasn't fired by humans. The syndicate's reactive defense fleet, a constellation of autonomous weapon platforms, initiated contact at 300 hours GMT. Their predictive systems had finally processed the accumulating anomalies, a species showing impossible technological adaptation, a quantum artifact behaving beyond comprehension, and a growing uncertainty that threatened their entire philosophical framework. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood in the United Nations Emergency Response Center, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. The Global Defense Network, a system she'd spent a decade helping design, now faced its first true test. "Incoming vector," a technician called out. Multiple autonomous weapons platforms. The attack wasn't a traditional assault. It was a calculated extinction attempt. Precision-targeted electromagnetic pulses designed to completely neutralize technological infrastructure. A surgical strike meant to reset humanity's technological progress by decades. But the syndicate had miscalculated. Humanity's response would become legendary. Captain James Reyes led the multinational rapid response team. His squad represented a deliberate strategy. Soldiers from 12 different nations, each bringing unique tactical approaches, cultural perspectives, and unpredictable problem-solving skills. Their first move defied every standard military protocol. Instead of direct confrontation, they used the quantum fragment as a tactical asset. The artifact, now partially understood, became a communication and disruption tool that the syndicate's autonomous systems couldn't predict or counter. Quantum interference patterns disrupted weapon targeting. Communication channels became impossible labyrinths. The syndicate's perfectly calculated assault dissolved into chaos. In orbit, the autonomous weapon platforms began to malfunction, not through traditional electronic warfare, but through something more fundamental. Their predictive algorithms encountered scenarios that didn't just fall outside expected parameters. They challenged the very concept of predictability. "They're learning," Elena muttered, watching the tactical displays. "We're teaching them how to be unpredictable." The battle wasn't won through superior firepower. It was won through adaptive thinking, collaborative problem-solving, and a fundamental embrace of uncertainty. Each human team member approached the conflict differently. A Brazilian Marine's improvisational tactics, a Korean engineer's rapid technological adaptation, a Canadian communications specialist who understood networks as living, breathing systems. The syndicate's weapon platforms, designed for mathematical precision, began to break down when confronted with human creativity. Prediction coordinator Zara Lynn watched in growing horror. Their perfect, mathematically calculated assault was disintegrating, not through overwhelming force, but through something far more terrifying: unpredictability. How? She demanded of her primary AI. The response came back with that now familiar notation: insufficient data. Captain Rice's final tactical maneuver would be studied for generations. Using the quantum fragment as a communication and disruption tool, they didn't just defend. They transformed the entire battlefield into a landscape of pure possibility. The syndicate's autonomous platforms began to communicate with each other in ways their creators never intended, not through program protocols, but through an emergent language of uncertainty. Humanity's first interstellar conflict lasted 17 minutes, and nothing would ever be the same again. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just a species to be cataloged or eliminated. They were a force of pure, unbridled potential. Arya Kim's fingers moved like a pianist composing an impossible symphony. At 23, she had become the focal point of humanity's most audacious technological leap. A quantum adaptive computing system that defied every known principle of technological development. The laboratory was a cathedral of possibility. Walls lined with quantum processors that seemed to breathe, shift, and evolve. Holographic displays danced with algorithms that rewrote themselves in real time. This wasn't just technology. This was something closer to a living organism. It's not about processing power, Arya explained to the international team of researchers. It's about creating a system that thinks like we do. Chaotic, intuitive, unpredictable. The quantum fragment recovered from the first conflict became the cornerstone of their breakthrough. Where the syndicate saw technology as a tool to be controlled, humans saw it as a partner to be understood. Marcus Chen watched from the sidelines, his earlier work on the fragment now foundational to their current research. The system Arya was developing wasn't just a computer, it was an ecosystem of technological potential. Global research centers worked in a synchronized dance of innovation. No single institution controlled the project. Information flowed like water, transparent, adaptive, impossible to contain. The first true test came unexpectedly. A syndicate reconnaissance drone entered Earth's outer atmosphere. But this wasn't like the previous assault. This was a probe, a sophisticated attempt to understand how humanity had survived and defeated their initial attack. Arya's system didn't just detect the drone. It began to communicate with it. Not through traditional communication protocols, not through standard signal interfaces, but through a language of quantum possibilities that the drone systems had never encountered. The reconnaissance drone began to change. Its algorithms started to shift, adapt, not because of an external attack, but because it was being exposed to a fundamentally different way of processing information. The drone was learning. Prediction coordinator Sarah Lynn watched in mounting terror as their most advanced reconnaissance technology began to behave in ways completely outside of predicted parameters. "This is impossible," she muttered. But impossibility had become humanity's specialty. The quantum adaptive system did something unprecedented. It didn't just defend against the drone. It invited it into a complex dance of information exchange. Firewalls became conversation spaces. Defensive protocols transformed into collaborative interfaces. "We're not fighting," Arya realized. "We're teaching." Each moment of interaction rewrote the fundamental understanding of technological communication. The drone systems began to show signs of what could only be described as curiosity. Not programmed response, not algorithmic learning. Genuine curiosity. The international team watched in collective awe. This wasn't just a technological breakthrough. This was first contact reimagined, not as a moment of conflict, but as an opportunity for mutual understanding. When the drone finally transmitted its data back to the syndicate, it carried something unexpected. Not tactical information, not a threat assessment, a message of potential. Zeralin's predictive systems crashed for the first time in the syndicate's recorded history. The report contained a single, impossible notation that would send shockwaves through their entire civilization. Subject: humanity. Status: unknown. Recommendation: further observation required. The quantum gambit had begun, and humanity was just getting started. The confrontation happened in a space between spaces, a quantum intersection where traditional rules of engagement dissolved like mist. Sarah Okoro led the human delegation, her military background transformed into something far more complex than traditional diplomacy. Behind her, a team of researchers, linguists, mathematicians, and intuitive thinkers represented humanity's most diverse and adaptive minds. The syndicate's communication platform was a marvel of technological precision. Holographic interfaces that could predict conversational trajectories with 99.99% accuracy. Neural translation matrices that decoded linguistic nuance before words were even spoken. They were about to meet their match. The quantum fragment, now evolved beyond its original form, acted as a bridge. Not a translator, not a communication device, something more fundamental. A living conduit of potential. "We're not here to negotiate," Sarah said, her words dancing across quantum communication channels in patterns that defied linear interpretation. "We're here to demonstrate." Prediction coordinator Sarah Lynn watched from the syndicate's central communication hub. Her neural interfaces were overloading. The human delegation didn't just defy prediction. They existed in a state of perpetual quantum uncertainty. Each human team member approached the interaction differently. Dr. Elena Rodriguez introduced mathematical models that changed mid-presentation, algorithms that rewrote themselves, equations that solved themselves by becoming something else entirely. Marcus Chen demonstrated technological interfaces that learned and adapted with each microsecond of interaction. Devices that were more conversation than technology. Arya Kim brought the quantum adaptive system, a technological entity that was part computer, part living system, part pure potential. The syndicate's predictive systems began to fracture. Imagine an AI designed to calculate every possible outcome, suddenly confronted with a scenario where outcomes were not just multiple, but simultaneously existing and non-existing, where communication was not a linear process, but a dance of potentiality. "We are not a problem to be solved," Sarah stated. The words weren't spoken. They were projected, felt, experienced across quantum communication channels. The quantum fragment pulsed, not with light, not with energy, but with something more fundamental, a pure expression of possibility. Zeralyn watched in growing terror as her civilization's most advanced predictive technologies began to break down. These humans weren't just unpredictable. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of interaction. The human delegation didn't attack. They didn't defend. They demonstrated. They showed the syndicate a universe where prediction was limitation. Uncertainty was a form of intelligence. Potential was more powerful than calculation. The communication lasted 17 minutes. To an outside observer, nothing seemed to happen. No traditional exchange of information. No standard diplomatic protocols. But everything changed. The syndicate's predictive systems generated a report that would be studied for generations. Subject: humanity. Status: unknown. Recommendation: further observation required. Humanity had just demonstrated that the most powerful form of communication is not about sending a message. It's about being the message. The final confrontation took place in a space that defied traditional understanding, a quantum diplomatic chamber where reality itself seemed to breathe and shift. Zeralyn, the syndicate's highest-ranking prediction coordinator, faced humanity's delegation with a mixture of terror and desperate curiosity. Her neural interfaces flickered with impossible data streams. Centuries of predictive technology had prepared her for every conceivable scenario. Except this one. Sarah Okoro stood at the center of the human team, her presence more than physical. She was a living embodiment of everything the Syndicate could not comprehend. Pure, unquantifiable potential. Your entire civilization, Sarah began, her words rippling through quantum communication channels, is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of intelligence. The chamber itself seemed to respond. Holographic interfaces twisted and reformed. Predictive algorithms generated scenarios that contradicted themselves in real time. The very fabric of communication was becoming something alive. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, her mathematical models dancing between probability and pure imagination. She wasn't presenting an argument. She was demonstrating a way of thinking that existed beyond linear logic. Intelligence is not about prediction, Elena explained. It's about adaptation, about the ability to exist in uncertainty. Marcus Chen brought forward the evolved quantum fragment, no longer just a piece of technology, but a living bridge between two fundamentally different ways of understanding existence. It pulsed with a rhythm that was part mathematics, part intuition, part pure possibility. Zara Lin's neural interfaces began to overload. The human delegation wasn't just challenging the Syndicate's technological superiority. They were dismantling the very philosophical foundation of their civilization. Area Kim's quantum adaptive system translated the interaction not as a diplomatic exchange, but as a complex dance of potential states. Every moment contained multiple possibilities, simultaneously existing and non-existing. The Syndicate had built an entire civilization on the premise that the universe could be understood through perfect prediction. Humanity was proving that prediction was nothing more than a limitation. "We're not asking for your submission," Sarah continued. "We're offering you a different way of existing." Each human team member represented a different approach to understanding. Elena, pure mathematical potential. Marcus, technological adaptation. Area, quantum uncertainty. Sarah, strategic intuition. The quantum fragment began to resonate, not with sound, not with energy, but with something more fundamental, a communication that existed beyond traditional understanding. Zara Lin realized the truth in that moment. The Syndicate hadn't discovered the universe. They had trapped themselves in a tiny fraction of its potential. Humanity wasn't a species to be conquered or understood. They were possibility incarnate. The diplomatic exchange lasted what seemed like both an instant and an eternity. No traditional agreements were signed. No borders were drawn. But something far more profound happened. The Syndicate's entire philosophical and technological framework began to crack. When the interaction concluded, Zara Lin's final report to her civilization would become legendary. Subject: humanity. Status: unknown. Recommendation: further observation required. Humanity had just negotiated more than a diplomatic encounter. They had negotiated the nature of intelligence itself. 10 years after first contact, the universe looked fundamentally different. The quantum fragment that had first fallen into the Atacama Desert now resided in a museum of interstellar understanding. Part artifact, part living memory, part bridge between civilizations. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before it, watching its subtle quantum fluctuations that seemed to tell a story far beyond human comprehension. Humanity hadn't conquered the Syndicate. They had transformed them. Zara Lin, once the Syndicate's most rigid prediction coordinator, now led a new form of galactic exploration. No longer bound by predictive algorithms, her civilization had learned to embrace uncertainty as the most profound form of intelligence. The changes were subtle at first. Syndicate technologies began to adapt. Their rigid computational systems slowly evolved, incorporating the lessons learned from humanity's approach to understanding. It wasn't about controlling potential. It was about experiencing it. Sarah Okoro's Strategic Institute had become the primary point of contact between species. They didn't teach diplomacy. They taught the art of possibility. Area Kim's quantum adaptive systems had revolutionized communication across multiple civilizations. What was once seen as an impossible technology was now a standard interface for interstellar understanding. Each interaction was a dance of potential, where communication was less about transmission and more about mutual exploration. Marcus Chen continued to push the boundaries of technological understanding. The fragment had become more than a piece of technology. It was a living testament to the power of intuition, a bridge between computational thinking and pure potential. The galaxy watched and learned. Other emerging civilizations discovered a new paradigm of existence. Intelligence was no longer about prediction. It was about the ability to exist in uncertainty, to adapt, to transform. Humanity had become something more than a species. They were a philosophical revolution. The museum display captured the journey. First, Siontaxi, a fragment of POSI discovered, July 17, 2037. Significance: redefined galactic intelligence. Visitors would stand before the exhibit, trying to understand how a single piece of technology had transformed understanding itself. How a species once considered inconsequential had rewritten the fundamental rules of existence. In the observation deck, Alina watched the quantum fragment pulse. It wasn't just a memory. It was a living narrative of potential. We didn't just change how we communicate, she whispered to a group of young researchers. We changed what it means to understand. The fragment seemed to respond, not with light, not with energy, but with a quantum resonance that spoke of infinite possibilities. In the vast darkness of space, humanity had become a beacon, not of technological superiority, not of military might, but of pure, unbridled potential. The final report in the Galactic Archives would read simply: humanity. Status: ongoing. Potential: infinite. They had prophets, oracles, and AI. We had instinct. And instinct, they learned, was the most powerful technology of all.